From a childhood filled with chaos to a career spanning more than 3 decades in the military, Ken Webb's story is one of faith, resilience, and rediscovery. Today on Journey with Jake, Ken opens up about the battles he's faced, both on and off the field, and how those experiences shaped the man he is today. Now living in Peru, learning Spanish, and writing his first novel, Ken shows us what it means to truly live with purpose and not just exist. This is an incredible journey of courage, healing, and adventure. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. Music fades, I just want to welcome you once again to Journey with Jake. If you're new here, this is where we dive into the stories of adventure, resilience, and the purpose that shape who we are. Don't forget to follow along on Instagram at Journey with Jake Podcast. It's a great way to see the personal side of my own adventures and stay up to date with what's coming next. Today's guest, Ken Webb, brings such an incredible mix of grit and grace to his story. From a difficult childhood to over 30 years of service in the military, Ken's life has been about overcoming obstacles, trusting his faith, and continuing to grow, even now as he lives in Peru, learning Spanish and writing his first novel. And if you enjoy this conversation, be sure to go back and listen to bonus episode 10 with Special Forces operator Chris Brewer, another powerful story about courage, purpose, and the call to adventure. All right, let's get into it with Ken Webb. All right. Another episode of Journey with Jake is here, and I've got Ken Webb joining me. Ken, welcome to Journey with Jake.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I read a little bit about your background and kind of what you've done. You've spent a lot of time in the military as a big part of your life and who you are, but also your childhood was something that was a little bit different. And before we talk about your military career and what you've got going on now, I'd like to go back and what was it like growing up in a home marked by trauma and chaos in your mind?
I mean, it was difficult. I mean, I'm a Christian. I did a lot of praying. You know, I was raised mostly by my maternal grandparents, meaning the mother and father of my mother. But then my mother was married 5 times, and you know, what was step father and stepbrothers. There's always difficulty, always tension in there, and sometimes I bounced back and forth between homes. It was very difficult. It was very difficult for me, and it was in the 70s because I was born in 69, and people didn't understand as much about children at that time. And I'm sure it was probably better than it was like in 1940s, 50s, or 60s, but my experience, and you know, at that time we were just getting out of the phase where children were supposed to be seen and not heard. So, you know, you have any trauma, you just kind of suffer in silence. I really am very fortunate for my grandparents. I'm referring to my mother's parents because they were a source, like an anchor for me in that. And it was, you know, through them, my grandfather was a very good Christian, and my grandmother was a Christian also, not as outspoken about it, but I have to give them credit for being like my rock.
Whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up outside of South Philadelphia, a town called Collingdale, Collingdale. It's about, I guess, about 2 miles, maybe 2.5 miles, straight line distance from the Philadelphia airport.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
I've been.
to give people an idea, if you've flown in, but it's not, this isn't a huge town, and I don't know anybody famous from there, but it's in Delaware County. It's not in Delaware, but it's in Delaware County. And it's next to Sharon Hill, you know, Upper Darby, Springfield, those kind of towns. And yeah, it's a lower income town.
Gotcha.
I think it's also where my mother grew up. So it was a nicer neighborhood at that time.
Well, so it sounds like your grandparents were a huge influence on you for the good, which was nice to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
You talked about being a Christian. That's something you just kind of grew up with because you talked about praying a lot. Talk about your faith a little bit.
Well, I mean, I'm not one of these people that, they say you have to know a specific time when you became a Christian. I used to tell people when I was 13 years old, because then I did the sinner's prayer. I was in a place of prayer meeting and did the sinner's prayer, but I don't believe that. I mean, if you look in the Bible, it doesn't say you have to like say a specific prayer. That's just something that people do. And I believed before then. So I think it was before that. I don't know exactly when, but I mean, growing up, at least with my grandparents, my grandfather always went to church. Now, something interesting, my grandmother did not. He lived right around the corner from the church. She would prepare breakfast and lunch and everything like that. Very traditional, husband and wife. She never learned to drive. She worked up until they had kids, and then she didn't work. Her job was to take care of the kids, but she kept the house spotless and always cooked and cleaned, did everybody's laundry. Her adult kids, she wanted to do their laundry. Bring your laundry, I'll do it. And only my uncle did that. The two sisters did not. But I went to Sunday school. But in my case, at least, I don't think this was from the church. I think this was just my grandfather. It was a Reformed Episcopalian church, which falls under the Anglican. It's very different than Episcopalian. Episcopalian has become very liberal. This Reformed Episcopalian is still very conservative. But I didn't actually attend church until I was confirmed into the church, and that was at the age of 13.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then when I moved down to Texas to be with my mother after her third divorce, or during her third divorce, I started going to a Baptist church. But now I've moved back down here in Peru. I go to an Anglican church, and it is a conservative Anglican church. I believe more along those lines. I mean, if you're a Christian, you're a Christian. But I just, when I read and study, I'm more along the lines with that. I'm not seeing people in the Bible that were prohibited from drinking alcohol. Jesus drank alcohol, and there was wine available in those days that was non-alcoholic. There was grape juice was available, and yet he drank the alcoholic kind. Some Baptists, some other denomination will tell you, you can't dance. Well, people danced in the Bible. I mean, I guess there's a full spectrum. There are different kinds of dancing, different ways you can dress when you dance. But I think instead of getting involved in legalism thing, I think God is much more concerned with our relationship with him than in how we dress or even in what we do. Our relationship with him is actually more important. So yeah, it was. I prayed a lot through some of those tough times. I do feel I was delivered through a lot of that. I didn't witness any like miracles, but things that just like when the percentages were very much that, something should have gone the wrong way and it through a lot of prayer, it went the right way. I give God that credit.
Was it growing up? Was it like abuse and things like that? Was it just instability? Your mom's getting divorced a bunch of times. Kind of all of the above. Is that what was going on?
No, there was some abuse. There was some sexual abuse from a stepbrother. That was the only person that was sexual abuse. My mother, it was some. I mean, the times change, but there was verbal abuse, psychological abuse, even from my mother. Definitely from my stepfathers, actually.
Right. Yeah.
My mother died in July the 30th, 2024. My stepfather just died this year. He had dementia. He was in a nursing home. I can't say he was really abusive. He was maybe narcissistic, especially in the end, but he wasn't really an abusive person. And he was never abusive physically with my mother. He might have played some games with her. I know my mother was married. Her second husband was a pathological liar. He was a salesman. And so, but my mother was divorced from her second husband. I guess I must have been 4 years old, something like that. So I don't remember him. There was no physical, sexual, psychological abuse.
I know you've spent a big part of your career in the military, but I thinking back to those early days and the struggles you went through, do you feel it helped prepare you for your, the struggles you'd face later, like in combat and being in the military?
I think there are many ways, to prepare for something. I think it did, but I don't want to give somebody the impression that it prepared me better than other things. You can learn not to burn your hand by sticking it in the fire by listening to common sense and observing, or you could stick your hand in the fire. That doesn't mean sticking your hand in the fire is the best way to do it. So I think it did. It helped me because some of these issues and things I ran into in the military seemed very little compared to what I had faced as a child, and they weren't like life and death situations as a child, but it was something where like I was like, you're a child, you don't have control, you don't have money, you can't just get up and say, well, I'm going to live over here, or no, I'm not going to do that. I'm
Right.
not going to obey your rules. You just can't do that when you're a child.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When you look back at that childhood, is there a lesson that you've carried throughout your life that you learned as a child?
What I learned from that, and I mean, anybody can get the right answer on a test. So they say, don't steal, don't do this, don't lie, don't use bad language. But then following through and do it, that's another. I mean, none of us would eat junk food or anything. We all know it's bad for us, but we do it. One thing I try to take from that is, face your demons, to deal with your problems, to take care of things, not just during this life, but, before you die, get a will, make sure everything's taken care of. Don't leave everybody with a mess. Be responsible. Everything I've read, when people get older, they're mostly bothered by not the things they did, but the things they did not do. So, chase your dreams. That's what I'm doing down here in Peru. I could have worked as a contractor. I was making good money. And I decided, what, I'm 56, people my age are dying, cancer, stroke, everything else. I'm going to do what I want to do. I do not believe with a mentality of sitting in front of the television. I didn't retire early so I could watch television. I go to the gym, I read a lot, I'm learning Spanish, writing my first novel. I'm going to work on my doctorate. I want to do it online so I can continue to live down here and to continue to learn Spanish.
You're talking about, living, actually living and not just kind of going through life, which I like to hear. And this is podcast. It's all about that. It's an adventure podcast for you. And usually I kind of do this at the end of my show. I want to do it right now because we're kind of jumping into things that you're doing. What does adventure mean to you?
Well, adventure to me, I mean, I am not an adrenaline junkie. I'm afraid of heights. They have this thing over the cliffs here where you get on like a parachute. It's not a parachute. It's like a paragliding type thing with an engine. And somebody will go with you and they'll take you out. And people are saying, oh, no, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe. And I said, yeah, but you have to sign a disclosure for that, don't you? That if you get dismembered or die. I said, I don't have to do that at the school I go to. So there is some danger there. There's some danger that they're just not admitting to or don't want to think about, or they just don't care. And I'm not I am afraid of heights. I took flying lessons. The only thing I couldn't do was solo, and that's because I was afraid. So, but adventure to me is not only putting yourself in physical danger. Now, I am a big scuba diver, by the way. Ironically, depths don't bother me. It's the heights.
The other way.
So yeah, and adventure to me is going out, trying something new, pushing yourself. Asked my teacher, should I continue with 2 hours a day on Spanish or go to 4 when my book is done? She thinks 2 hours a day. The one teacher said, the other teacher said 4. I think in order for you to improve at something, whether that's going to the gym or running or anything else, you have to push yourself a little bit. You have to, if you're comfortable, if you're just lifting weights enough and you're never sore afterwards, you're not doing a good job. You need to push yourself a little bit. So I need to be a little uncomfortable, and it needs to be a little bit inconvenient, or I'm not, maybe inconvenient isn't the right word, but it needs to be a little bit of a strain on me, just like whether that's physical or mental. And I'm not saying some of these Japanese students go because their companies send them 8 hours a day and they're like sleeping in class. So I don't mean like that. Yeah. I don't mean push yourself in the gym until you're in pain and you injure yourself. But, to me, adventure is getting out, trying something new, traveling, not being stupid with your money, but not going with the idea that you're going to die with all your money. You don't want to be the richest person in the graveyard, but you also don't want to be the poorest person in the graveyard. You don't want to die struggling for money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's finding that right balance for sure. No, I appreciate that. So I know you spent over 30 years in the military. Why the military? What got you into the military? You always wanted to do it? Was it something you'd looked up to as a kid? Why did you get in the military?
You're exactly correct. The answer would be yes to that. Okay, but I always knew I wanted to be in the military. I wasn't sure, never really thought I wanted to be in the Air Force, but I never really thought I wanted to be in the Marine Corps, but I was like Army or Navy, something like that. And I knew Army was big and you could live in many different places. Navy was always kind of neat. I loved the water, but I was at a junior college one day, saw somebody I'd gone to high school with. He was in the military uniform. And I said, you know what? People don't normally wear military uniforms with boots and the hat and everything. I mean, I was like, so what's going on here? And he and I weren't really friends. We just kind of knew each other. He was an acquaintance, and he was in the ROTC program. So that summer, I went to basic training and was enlisted for a little while, and then I got commissioned through the University of Texas in Arlington, and I was commissioned as a military police officer. But I was in the Army Reserves. This was in 1992. It was after the Gulf War, and military is being downsized. So when you're a reservist, well, if you're not going to continue education, which I tried getting a master's degree immediately after my bachelor's, it didn't work out. But if you're not going to do that, then you need to get a civilian job as well. So I had various civilian jobs. I taught English for a year. I was not certified, but I taught it for a year as a substitute at Arlington High School in Arlington, Texas, 11th grade English. Worked for a friend's business for a while, and not it wasn't call it technical writing, but really it was just more writing manual stuff for a company. It wasn't that technical. And then I got a job with American Airlines, and I was just working in reservations at American Airlines. I was a captain in the Army Reserves, and there was this tour, these active duty tours. So you have these reservists who go 1 week a month, 2 weeks in the summer. Sometimes they go 2 weekends a month, but you can go on active duty for a while. And there was this tour in Kosovo, and started on the 15th of April, 2000. And I was a force protection officer, and I was in Kosovo one night. And I was in Pristina, Kosovo, and everything went down on lockdown. And at that time, due to troops being deployed and wartime operations, if that's the right word, combat operations, a lot of the purse strings were open, and people were mobilized voluntarily and involuntarily. American Airlines changed its policies from being mobilized 5 years to as long as troops are deployed, which is technically, I think, still the case now. But I would just mobilize, and I'd go on one tour after another, look at something neat. I stayed, eventually transferred over to military intelligence, and that, was what I wanted to do. And I had a scholarship, by the way, for my bachelor's degree. So then on my master's, I used tuition assistance, which paid for most of it. I went to American Military University, which is entirely online. And I used a small amount of my GI Bill when the tuition assistance was put on hold for a while. So instead of 36 months, I have 34 months left. So I want to pursue my doctorate, and I have no idea what I'll do with it. I want to do it in intelligence, unclassified, of course. The classes will all be unclassified, and I don't know if I'll do anything with it, but it's a personal goal. I think we all have to have goals.
I like that. Yeah, even though you may not want to do anything with it, who knows, or what you'll do with it, you have that goal. I like the fact that you have that goal.
Mhm.
So all these tours, you started Kosovo. Where else did you serve? Like what other tours, if you could tell?
After Kosovo, I went to Joint Task Force 6, which is Joint Task Force South. Now, of course, for those members who are in the Reserves or National Guard, there's something called the Soldiers Sailors Act. And that gives you, and things may have changed because I've been retired a few years, but gave you 90 days to return to work after that. So I went to Joint Task Force 6, which is now Joint Task Force South. It's counter narcotics on the border. And it was the border of Texas. It was in El Paso, New Mexico. Did we go in California? I don't think I ever went to California with them, but we'd go do and it was, I was still military police at that time and had some intel people with me. We would be in civilian clothes and do assessments of the border. And we weren't trying to stop people from coming in illegals, but we were trying to stop drug trafficking there. But it wasn't stopping it with firearms. We weren't carrying firearms. It was to do an assessment, what things we could do. We had some counterintelligence people working with us, not for us, but to lower that. Then after that, let's see, the 2002, well, 2003, I went to Iraq. And I was actually, nope, I take it back. I went to the Joint Analysis Center in England, Joint Analysis Center in Molesworth, England. I enjoyed it. I was there for 7 months. And then I bought an around the world ticket. I was going to go back to work at American Airlines, but I had 3 months. And I was traveling around the world. I was in Thailand. I was on a scuba diving boat. I got off the boat, checked my email. There's no WhatsApp or anything then. Checked my email. This was in 2002, in December. It may have been 2003. It was 2003, early January, or I guess at that point, yeah, or early January, maybe late December. I'm not entirely. I think, yeah, early January. Early January, because I did New Year's in Tokyo. Got an email, return to the United States immediately. We've been mobilized. I contacted my Army Reserve unit. I said, look, I'm a scuba diver. I've been scuba diving for 3 days. I can't get on a plane. 4 hours, I'll get decompression sickness. So they said, as soon as you can, come back. So I did. We did a convoy from Grand Prairie, Texas, down to Fort Hood. And this was like during Operation Iraqi Freedom. So this was before they got real organized with the stuff. So after this, they got to where people would go in and do their medical stuff throughout the year and prepare. But we had people going through, one guy had like 6 teeth pulled, or some people got a lot of shots. And then they got better with this afterwards to where people were getting shots, so they were always ready to deploy. But in the beginning, it was a real mess. And I went over there. I was a battle captain working under the operations officer of the S3. And then I eventually became a company commander because I hadn't had a company command yet. We returned to the United States. I went back to being a weekend warrior for a while. And then I did a branch transfer to military intelligence and went to Fort Huachuca, which is where I transitioned to. It's in Arizona, to military intelligence. I guess it's about an hour. I think it's about an hour, maybe a little bit more from Tucson Drive, and it's not terribly far from the border itself. It's and was up there for just under 3 years, 33 months. I remember that. And then my new reserve unit got mobilized, and we went to Afghanistan. And I went there in 2009. But before this, we had a train up. And arrived, I guess it was October 2009, and left August 2010. And then after that, let's see, I did a very short tour. I mean, like 60 days to Stuttgart, Germany, support of Operation, I think it was New Dawn. Can't remember the name of it very well. And we were counting airstrikes, and that was just because I had the right clearance. I had a top secret clearance. There was nothing glorious about that. I came back, was then up at Fort Sill with the 75th Training Division, National Guard and Reserve members before they went overseas to Iraq, mostly Iraq or Afghanistan, also some missions in Honduras. But train them to, making sure, maybe instead of training them, there's some training, but maybe it's more accurate to say assessing them to see that they were ready to go, getting up to speed for that. And as a unit as a whole, not as individuals. And then I did that same thing down at Fort Hood, Texas. And I did that about 3 years. And then I went to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and I was running some contracts out there specifically with linguists for language working alongside of interrogators, but I was not an interrogator. I was not running interrogators. I was just running the linguists. I was out there for 18 months, got a tour going to Germany. It was in logistics. I had an additional skill identifier in logistics, but it was very hard for me because my background was military police and intelligence. People helped me. I struggled through it. And then I got to work back and I did that for a year. And then I was in Kaiserslautern, Germany. And then I did 9 months in Stuttgart again, and enjoyed both places, or advantages to both places. Returned from that. And of course, in between all these tours, I would go on trips and scuba dive and travel. And
Yeah.
I had a great time, really. It was stressful. Trying to piece together these tours can be very stressful because there's time limits. You could be mobilized. And when you reach that time limit of being mobilized, used to be 3 years. Now it's gone to 4, I think. But then what you have to do is you have to deploy, and that resets your clock. And deploying meaning going to Iraq or Afghanistan, and not sometimes Kuwait, I think, but now I don't know if Kuwait does it or not. But then after that, I was out in an intelligence role, a special access program, but in an intelligence role, more administrative, out at Central Command at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. And I was out there about 15 months, and then went out to Kosovo, not Kosovo, went to Camp Bondsteel, not Camp Bondsteel, that is Kosovo, went to Camp Arifjan in Kuwait. And I was there just, I guess, about a year. And I was kind of like a mayor of this camp for a lot of intel people out there to make sure the lights were on, make sure everything was good, listening to their complaints and trying to make things happen. And then, believe it or not, it was during the height of COVID. This was 2019. I remember I think might have been November, I started hearing whispers about this COVID thing. And then a lot of us thought it would just die out. So it was like, by August, this whole thing will be dead. December, it got really serious. January, people were wearing masks and all kinds of lockdown. My retirement date was supposed to be June of 2020. And I returned to the United States, went down to a good friend's house down in Harlingen, Texas to sit out the COVID, the waiting period of quarantine, and did actually retire. And then 3 days later, got an email that said, so much of your retirement, because I was an intel officer, intelligence, along with other branches, they were extended another 2 years for me to try to make. I was lieutenant colonel, full colonel. But the dig about that was, to make full colonel, I had to get a battalion command. I had to get in charge of a battalion command. And when I went to go do this, they said, well, you have to have 2 years left to get a battalion command. And at that point, I'd only been extended 2 years and I got late notice, so I couldn't. But what I do, I started looking for another tour. The stuff in the system was showing me already retired, so I had to go about getting that corrected. A lot of manual stuff. I wound up going out to the United States Embassy, Baghdad, Iraq. My second time in Iraq, this time I was on a diplomatic mission under the Department of State, which meant for the first time in my military career, I had to get a visa to go there. I wasn't allowed to carry a weapon. I wasn't allowed to do anything militarily wise. It was, staying on the base a lot. We could wear our military uniforms sometimes. Most of the time we wore civilian clothes. And I was the chief of operations, which is not a job for an intelligence officer. That's a job for infantry, or if you're Air Force, a pilot, or Navy, maybe a pilot, or submariner, or something more, macho on those lines. So that was an interesting learning curve for me. And then that took me through September of 2021, and there wasn't really opportunity for another tour. I did do the contracting route after that. I was actually with my leave, which is vacation I'd accumulated. I was on active duty status until close to the end of October. So then I went back to Kuwait, and I did it as a contractor. And I was still in the Army Reserves at that time, but I went from being a lieutenant colonel with my own office and everything else to just being, hey, we need some help over here. Come over here. Hey, Ken. I went to being Ken, from Lieutenant Colonel Webb to Ken, or Sir to Ken. This particular contract, I didn't like it a whole lot. I felt, there's a lot of very good contractors out there, a lot of very good contracts. I felt like people were abusing some of their privileges. You got to live off the base and things going on that I didn't like. So my mother was taking care of my stepfather. He had dementia at that point. She said, I need you to come off that contract and come help me. And so I did, and we got him under control, and I found another contract, and I was going down I came down here to Peru. My best friend had stage 4 cancer. So I came down here and was spending time with her. I did the 4-day Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, and was waiting on another contract, as I stated. And then after 3 months, they called me and I said, you guys didn't give any updates. And I had to go back to the US to go through a medical screening. And that whole process they're going to have me go through could take up to a year, and they weren't going to pay me during that time. So down here where I'm living at in the Miraflores district of Lima, Peru, I'm by the ocean. And it's like living in maybe Santa Barbara, somewhere in California. But we're talking California terms. I've never lived there, but it's probably like 1/4 the cost.
Sure.
Maybe 1/5, depending. And I was learning Spanish. I was liking what I was doing. People my age, 3 people I wasn't friends with it, but I knew them. They died of cancer. Another one died from a heart attack. And I was like, this isn't for me. And the contract that I was being looked at was to go to a top secret facility over in Australia. I'd be working in a building with no windows, which is not a norm. That's normal for that type of job. but I'd be working 12-hour shifts, 12 noon to midnight for 2 days, and then midnight to noon for 2 days, and then 4 days off. And it was at a place called Pine Gap near Ayers Rock, and it was unbearable heat. And it wasn't like going to someplace really nice. I've been to Australia before once for about 21 days or 23 days, something like that. And did a lot of scuba diving there. And this was not in Perth or someplace that you'd want to really go to and stay at. So that is how I wound up. But my mother got sick last year, so I had to return to the U.S. I was on a student visa down here, which is hard to get. And then after she died, I'm her only child. I had to take care of her estate. My stepfather was in a home for people with dementia. And so I had to take care of that. And I was out of this country, meaning Peru, for 9 months and then returned the 8th of April, 2025.
Now you're in Peru, living in
Mhm.
Peru. Any along the way, were you ever married or anything like that, or no?
I've never been married, no kids. I've never really wanted to have kids. I think that has something to do with difficulties I had growing up. I feel like I want to enjoy my life. And now I'm 56, and I mean, people do it, but to me, I think it's off the table. I mean, I think, if you're going to have kids, that's great. I don't know. I mean, my mother passed away at 77. I mean, I wouldn't want to have a kid and then I don't make it to his high school graduation because I'm dead.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, her father lived to be 93, and her mother, who she smoked 2 packs a day for decades, lived to be 88. So, I mean, and my mother smoked 1 cigarette in her whole life. So I can't, we just don't know.
Yeah.
And
Now,
I've never been, I would like to get married someday.
Okay. So you are interested in that part of it, at least.
I think so. My
Dating,
mother
that
was
sort of thing.
married 5 times. So I tell people she took my turn.
She took advantage of it for you. So as far as, leaving American Airlines, leaving these contract jobs, going to Peru, why did you decide to do that? I mean, at least because the other thing you had stability, it's sort of a risk, kind of leaving that stability behind.
I have to be fair. Other people have said things along similar lines. I have to be clear. The retirement age for an Army reservist is 60 years old. So when you go on these active deployments in support of combat operations, you will take a year off that age. And you have to be a reservist doing that. You can't be on active duty doing that, a regular active duty soldier. So I got my age down to when I retired, I immediately started getting my pension. Now, the Army Reserve and National Guard retirement is based on points. And I had enough points that my retirement pension was the same as someone who had been on active duty who was in for 20 years. I have a whole lot of points. And also, I did retire from American Airlines. I didn't mention that, but they offered an early retirement in 2020. And you had to be like, I think it was 45 years old, and I was like 50, 51. And they, gave you a bunch of flight coupons, and I haven't started receiving my pension yet. I 55 up to 60 is when I have to take it, but it's at a reduced amount, and I'm debating about whether to start taking it. But what I'm trying to say is the risk maybe not as high if you have a pension. It's not as high a pension. I mean, some of these people that great adventurers, or some of these people that go in there like they're going to take over the world. I was going to say Donald Trump, but then he's so controversial. I don't want to say that. But some of these people, though, the thing in common that a lot of these people have, well, including him, but there's many other good examples. These people have families with a lot of money. I mean, if their business venture fails, they're going to be okay. And I know that I have a pension now, and I've been saving my whole life, so I'm able to now, and
Good,
I
so you
don't
have the
have
means.
kids. And I don't have kids. So, I mean, I spoke to my financial advisor today. He's a little bit younger than me, but he has 2 kids, and one of them is a junior in high school. So, I mean, I try to be charitable, but I haven't given the kind of money that people should spend on their children if they have it.
Yeah, no,
So I could have gone to contracting, still got my pension, but there comes a point where that, unless you love doing that, I mean, you get someone who's like an actor or a musician or something. I mean, some of these people are incredibly wealthy. I don't think hopefully they're not doing it for the money anymore. They're doing it because it's an art to them, and there's nothing wrong with making money. But,
Right.
if you need to be doing it because you love doing it.
Speaking of loving what you're doing, I know you love being in Peru. Mentioned you're writing a novel. Tell
Yes.
us a little bit about the novel and what that's all about, and why did you decide to write it?
Well, it's really this language school I go to down here is named El Sol, and Sol is the name for sun, SOL in Spanish, the sun. And the teachers down here have been a positive influence on me. I came down here saying I was going to study Spanish and I was going to study French and I was going to, before my mother got sick, and I was going to get my PhD and then write a book. And then I spoke to some of the teachers, and the one teacher, she said, well, why do you want to learn French? Do you want to live in France? And there's nothing bad about learning French, but it's not a world language like it was a long time ago. It's like, why are you going to do that? There should be a reason that you're doing that. In high school, you elect a language you're going to take, but so you have to take something. So yeah, sure, but Spanish is very practical. So I actually took that. I thought about that night, and I was like, you know what? Her name is Isabel. I said, she's right. Isabel, you're right. I told her the next day. And then speaking of one of my teachers, I actually spoke to him today, and his name is Romeo, and his mother is Italian, so he speaks some Italian. He studied it down here, and he spent 2 years in two different 1 year and then come back for another year in England studying English. So he speaks very good English. And he said, well, is your book about your PhD? Is it about your doctorate? And I said, no. And he said, then why do you have to wait to write it? Why you don't have kids? You're not married. You're not working. Why, write it, start it. And that was in August of 2023. I took a break of about 7 months when my mother died and started again on it before I came back here. So in all, I've spent, it'll be around a year and a half to write it, maybe 2 years, a little bit less, I guess. A year and a half. I'm kind of forgetting the question now. Am I going along the
Yeah,
right
just
lines?
no, just like why you decided to write the book.
Okay,
And
whatever. I'm sorry. It's really bad when you start answering a question and you talk so much you forget what you're talking about. But I don't have early Alzheimer's there. So I started writing it because it was therapeutic for me. I'm a very trusting person. I'm a very, I hide my emotions, but I'm actually very emotional. And, if I'm a friend with somebody, I put a lot of trust in them. And Trapped in Deception is a work of fiction. However, there is so much real stuff in that book. All the texts, all the emails that are in the book were taken from real texts and real emails, changing only the names, the dates, locations, times. And, I had a friend who really betrayed me, and he is not, I won't say a pathological liar. I'm no psychologist, but everything I know about pathological liars, they lie even when they don't have to lie. Things can be going their way, completely going their way. No reason to lie. They're still going to lie. He's not like that. He's much more dangerous because you're going to catch somebody who lies constantly. He's very smooth talker. And I worked for him for a while after I graduated university. And he was a salesman of sorts. He became a school teacher, and then he's in real estate now. And I was the best man at his wedding. But I realized he was so manipulative and so I don't know what you'd say, emotional, or even more than emotion, just a person who would just, suck you dry if they could, just use you and use you and use you. The bad person in my novel is modeled after him.
wow,
And
okay.
it is not, in the novel, he's a much worse person than this former friend of mine. In the novel, he's a murderer. He's a drug addict. He's really bad. But it's based on, like a lot of these movies, it's based on reality. They could be very loosely based, but this is more, his characteristics, this idea of gaslighting, which, as I found out, gaslighting is based off of a movie by the same name, very old movie where, you're just, well, wait, I didn't say that. And the very next day, well, you must have me confused with somebody else. I never said that. Never taking responsibility for own actions, and consequently maybe never feeling guilt, maybe being a sociopath. Emotion that I have seen from him is anger when he's caught in his lies, or when you don't buy into them, when you don't pay attention to him. The good person in the book is based loosely on me. The good person in the book is named Eddie, and he is a computer expert, which I am definitely not. but I needed something. In the novel, you need to base it on something, on someone, and it's loosely based on me, at least as far as his behaviors and his relationship to the bad person in the novel. Eddie was an intelligence officer in the Army Reserves, and he was in Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan the same times I was there. So I'm not, I was on this one podcast and people, it was live, and people were able to put in questions while it was going on. And they're like, well, did you give away any, operational information? Well, no, I didn't. Nothing I talked about really happened as far as operationally. The, the novel is out in Afghanistan and they're chasing a Taliban commander. I never did that. So, but he gets credited for killing the Taliban commander, which I don't want to give away too much, but it's like an accident, I'll go ahead and say it's a discharge of a weapon. And so he should have gotten reprimanded for it, but he was running with his pistol, and it was like, wow, that was a great shot. Well, he killed him by accident.
Gotcha.
Complete accident. He tripped into thing. How that does parallel my life, I kind of alluded to this earlier. I just kind of tripped into things. Peru is an excellent place to study Spanish. I didn't choose it this way. I was up in Cajamarca on a trip up there and wanted to go down to Oxapampa, which is a German settlement. I had to go through Lima. The president had gotten in trouble and was actually put in jail of Peru. This was back, I think it was 2022. And I couldn't go any farther than Lima. And I was like, well, I'm not just going to watch television. I can do that in the United States. I'm going to do something. So I started looking at Spanish schools. So I'm going to study Spanish again. I just tripped sometimes into these things. And I do think that's God. I do think that's God. It's like, because when I told you I retired twice. In 2020, I went through extreme depression. I didn't want to retire. I identified myself as a lieutenant colonel in the Army, even though I was a reservist. I was always on active duty. I was mobilizing, and it was like taking away my identity, my persona. I've heard mostly this is from, I've never been married, but like women, when they get divorced, it's harder on them. I've heard, because they take on the name of their husbands. So then it's like, well, now you're losing that. You're separating from that you've taken on. And whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I'm kind of using that as a reference, as something to compare it to. Not that I was married, but that I was I guess you'd say married to the Army. And then it's like, you're taking away my identity. You're out. You're done. And so the second time it was easier. And then when I did retire, and then I would say, even when I was doing the contracting, I was like, I don't really like this as much as I thought I was going to. It's all just about money. I know there's contractors out there who do a great job and they're very fulfilled. So I don't want to discourage anybody. And maybe I only did one contracting job. It was only for 7 months. So people do it for years. Some people move from contracting into government service, and then you are back in the government again. Some people love that, and they get second careers. But for me, it was a good thing getting out of the Army. Now, I guess I did have to retire, but if I was still working contracting, still working government service, it'd be very hard for me to write the book,
Sure.
pursue Spanish fluency and get my doctorate and make it a priority. And there are people who do it. I mean, we've met these people that, oh yeah, I got, I was in the Army 4 years. I worked in field artillery. I got my bachelor's degree in there, and then, did my master's degree in a year, and then working full time, got their doctorate, and then, people doing that. But I'm not that kind of person.
I'm with
I
you. I'm
take
not
my
either. Yeah.
Yeah.
Likewise.
So yeah.
Well, it's amazing how it's evolved. I mean, from dealing with some trauma as a child, getting in the military, working for American Airlines, doing some contract work, and then finding yourself in Peru. And like you said, you weren't planning on being there, but you ended up there for whatever circumstance. And like you said, in your mind, it was God that put you there. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing to say. So I know for you, I've heard you say, or I've read somewhere talking about living, not just existing. And when you think of that, what does that mean to you?
Okay, what that means to me, I told you I had a great time being an Army reservist jumping tour to tour. Now, I need to talk on the downside of that. If I was an Army officer and I was on active duty, I would not have to worry about renewing my contract, looking for another tour, getting people above me in rank to sign off on this, getting my units to sign off, yes, we'll let you go. Sometimes arguing with people, getting them to do it, making concessions, making agreements with people. So I was doing what I had to do to build up a good retirement, retire earlier than 60. And so, I mean, I guess it's the old living to work or work to live, you know, and we don't, I mean, it's easy for you to say, well, it's easy for you to say now you have a pension, but I do know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to not have enough money to get your car fixed, to have pneumonia and need to go to the doctor. And you're like, I don't know if I have enough money to do this, to have your credit card maxed out. I've been in all those situations, have a toothache and not have enough money to go to the dentist, and then, and been without insurance. It's money is very important, but you want to live your life, and don't base it just on money. Base it on, you need to be able to live. You need to be realistic, but when you're able to, then I'm not saying don't work, but do something that you want to do what you love.
You love. I think that's a great thing. And that's what I do Journey with Jake because I love it. I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing who they are. I've really enjoyed hearing about who you are and what you're doing. Before we wrap it up though, tell me again the name of the book and when do we expect to see it?
Okay. It's with the editor right now in September, and it's Trapped in Deception.
Trapped in Deception.
It'll be out in December, and you can go to my website at Ken Webb with 2 B's, KenWebb 69. 69 is my birth year, KenWebb69.com. And I have a YouTube channel, at Webb 2000, same thing with Instagram. And they can find me on there. It's also on Facebook. And I'm actually spending a lot of money self-publishing. Critics are telling me I won't get my money back, and I'm okay with that. I want people to read the book and say this was good, because there's a lot of, especially now these days, people are just grinding out books.
Yeah.
Well, the cover looks good. And I paid somebody on Fiverr for the cover, by the way, but I want to read, I want to create something that's good. Just
Absolutely.
because, so the top physicists in the world, some of the people that are, the best at some of their professions, they don't ever become wealthy doing it. So you don't do it for that reason. You do it because you want to be as good as you can be at something, be the best version of yourself.
I like it. I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing that. I'm just going to end with some kind of, I guess we'll call them rapid fire. I don't know if there's a rapid fire, but just a few fun little things to kind of end us out here. So you're learning Spanish. I want to know, what's a Spanish phrase you've learned that kind of makes you smile, makes you happy?
My girlfriend in here, hablo contigo or con la pared. Am I speaking with you or with the wall? Meaning, like, are you listening to me? Also, recently, do you speak Spanish too?
I do speak a little Spanish. Yeah, I lived in Uruguay for a couple of years. So
recently, yeah. I think she came up with this one. I'm not sure, but I was saying, don't do this, don't do that, and she said, "Ken, soy un problema con piernas. I'm not a problem with legs." So there can be. I've noticed they have a good sense of humor down here.
I love that. That's great. So for you, when you're writing, are you a coffee or tea guy, or what is your choice of beverage to keep you going while you're writing?
I'm a coffee person, and I'm a binge writer. My most creative time, I want to get up early in the morning to write, but then I get on a binge. So I'll go to Spanish class, I'll come back, and I'll be writing all through the night, keeping myself up with coffee, because I get these, some people say the mental blocks don't exist, but whatever it is, it's stopping me from writing. And then it will just come hit me. And then all of a sudden, it was just like when I was working on my master's degree. And sometimes I had to get a paper in by a certain time, and the teacher would say, "Oh, this is excellent." It would be like the last 2 paragraphs, and I wrote it in like 4 minutes. And sometimes, when you're under that pressure and you just write, sometimes it's just good. And I'm going to tell people, don't over analyze your stuff. Comes a point where you say it's done, and AI will look at your stuff and scrutinize it, but its objective is to make it the most grammatically correct it can. And sometimes that takes away from the art.
Sure. That makes sense. I
I
like
write
that.
better than AI can correct my paper too.
Perfect. I love it. What's one place in Peru that's just really kind of stolen your heart?
I would have to say Oxapampa or Pazuso, if I'm pronouncing it right. That's the old German settlement. It's very beautiful. The people there do not speak German, but a lot of them are blonde. You see a lot of people with blue eyes, and that's same reason in the U.S. You know, my grandparents' family were from Germany, but generations back, they no longer speak German. It gets out. But a lot of the influence, so I would say that Oxapampa.
Very nice. And then finally, my last question. Again, thank you so much for sharing who you are. But if you could sum up your journey in one word, what would that be?
Struggle.
Yeah. Childhood, military,
Yeah.
even
It
learning
didn't come
Spanish. There's a struggle.
didn't come easy. Didn't come easy.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Ken, thank you so much for coming on Journey with Jake.
All right. Thanks for having me, Jake.
What an incredible conversation with Ken Webb. I'm so grateful to Ken for opening up and sharing not just his military experiences, but the personal journey that shaped who he is today. His story is a reminder that no matter where we've come from, it's never too late to live fully and chase the things that make us come alive. You can learn more about Ken, his writing, and his adventures by visiting kenwebb69.com. I'll also have that link in the show notes. As always, thank you for listening to Journey with Jake. It means so much to have you along for these adventures each week. If you've been inspired by Ken's story, please share this episode with someone who could use a little encouragement. And don't forget to leave a rating or review. It really helps others discover the show. Next time, we're hitting the open road with Matt Savino, who takes us along his incredible journey down the Pan American Highway. It's a wild ride packed with adventure, challenge, and heart. You're not going to want to miss it. Just remember, it's not always about the destination, as it is about the journey. Take care.